So first of all, just some background about myself. So I'm Poh Guan. So I've been with the company for 8 years plus now, mainly doing development and some project management as well. So I have been involved in the Schemes Phase 3 project, mainly on to do some bug fixing as well as the vertical layout feature, which I'll show you in a bit. So this presentation is brought to you by myself for the APAC region and Colin Kopka on the US region. So Colin was also involved in the project. Some of the features that I'm going to introduce is done by Colin. And so, yeah. Um, let's see. So just quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the prop schemes. So we introduced some new features for the prop schemes. It was already there in 11.5, but then there were some things that needed some improvements. So we added the functionality to embed schemes. We added some basic versioning. We introduced lazy schemes. And then we have a new UI layout, as well as added supports for presets. On the catalog scheme side, we have the preset builder, which is to support the presets that I just talked about. We have added a feature called group code domain. This is quite a popular feature, and a lot of people have been asking for it, so I'll show it in a bit. We have added the propagate functionality in the scheme builder, as well as something we call the layout converter, which is a tool that we made to make migration easier. So at the end, I will talk a little bit about a layout scheme versus a normal scheme, the pros and cons. Why would you use one over the other? Okay, so let's get started with the first thing. Embedding schemes. So this was one of the most popular feature requests that we received for phase 3. And it's basically that the user wanted a way for the schemes to be saved as part of the drawing rather than as a separate file. So what we have done is that we have introduced two ways of embedding the schemes. As you can see here, we have the auto embed, and over here we have the manual embed. So let's see. How does embedding schemes work? So in the backend is just saved as the memory stream in the world auxiliary. The way that it's saved is in the same format as if you would save a CM scheme file. It's just the key value pairs. We don't save the domains and we don't save the materials. Just be the key value pairs. So it's loaded into the scheme container in the select world hook. So this is, we're talking about the load timing. So when you do a select world, which means that in the multiple world drawing, if you enable multiple drawing mode, it means that when you're switching between drawings, of course, in a single drawing mode, this just means that when you're loading a single drawing. So this gets called. So when you load a drawing, it gets loaded into the scheme container. So when is it saved? It's saved when the drawing is saved. So it kind of makes sense to save them at the same time, since you're saving it together with the drawing. And this is enabled for all the schemes. You don't have to do any work at all. You can see in the wall schemes, you can see it in all the other schemes as well. So I just want to talk a little bit about embedding versus safe, since sometimes there are some confusion. What embedding is saving, saving is it embedding? So here I have a table that listed out all the differences. But of course, the main difference is that embedding a scheme means that you're saving it with the drawing. If you're saving a scheme, you're saving it as a file on your machine locally. So when you have embedded schemes, if you send a drawing to another person, the other user can see and use all the schemes that's embedded to the drawing. Whereas if you have saved your schemes, those are only accessible on the machine that they're saved. So they work like files, basically. And since we are streaming the schemes into the drawing, embedding will actually increase the drawing size, whereas saving does not affect drawing size because you're saving it locally. So auto embed will embed all the use schemes into the current drawing. So just now I showed you guys the auto embed option here. Here we have a little auto embed. So the auto embed, the way that it works is that when you apply a scheme, so it can be applied to target, applied to selection, applied to all, or if you initialize a snapper and the constructor actually calls the init from scheme method during the initialize process, then that scheme will be automatically embedded into the drawing. And as for the manual embed, you basically then have the choice of saying, okay, I want to embed this scheme, I don't want to embed that scheme, for example. Please do note that the auto embed option is per system. So if you turn on the auto embed for Fika, it will not affect the auto embed for your wall schemes. Let me just quickly jump to the next. Yep. Oh, yep. Then we have autosave as well. It's also a new functionality. But basically, if you have autosave turned on, all your edited schemes that will be saved to the default location that's defined in the settings dialog. So we added the filter group to make it easier for the users to see the different kinds of schemes, because now that we have introduced drawing schemes, it can get a little bit messy. You have your drawing schemes, you have the schemes that's saved locally on your machine, and we introduced presets as well. So we added a filter group. So for the filter group, embedded schemes will be grouped under the drawing group, whereas saved schemes will be grouped under the my schemes group. I will show you in a bit how it looks like. And then, yep, the timing. So the load timing that I talked about just now. So the load timing is a little bit different for all the scheme saved locally. It's loaded when you initialize the scheme container. So normally when the extension starts, the loaded schemes will get initialized, will get loaded. Whereas for embedded schemes, it's loaded in select row hook. So since the timing of loading embedded schemes is a little bit different and can be not so predictable, so there could be a case where if you're loading a drawing scheme, and then a scheme with the same name already exists, and in that case, we will append a suffix to the name, like drawing scheme bracket 1. Yep. So I was going to show you the filter group, but I think we can talk about that later in the UI layout. First, let's talk about versioning. So we added the versioning capabilities to to make it so that we can support system key changes. So if you have released a scheme earlier on with one system key and later on you decided to change it, you should have a way to modify it in code, like loaded one. So as part of it, we added versioning capabilities to the prop scheme class. So there's a method called version inside the prop scheme.cm class, and it can be increased in the code. So this version is saved when you are streaming this scheme either out as a separate file or embedded into drawing. So we'll save this version number, and then when you load them, you can check, oh, what version was it saved in, and then you can do whatever changes that you want to do. So right now, there's 3 places where this can be changed. The system key rename hooks. So in the prop scheme manager, this is where we keep all our scheme related hooks. So here we have a system key rename hooks for you to hook in if your system key changes. You can also access it in the load visitor. And last but not least, after load in prop scheme.cm. So if you have any data changes, I would recommend putting it in after load so you can check. So if my scheme was version something something, then oh, I want to change from blue to red or something. So this is useful in those cases. And you want to talk about lazy schemes. So what are lazy schemes? We talk about lazy a lot in our world, but it's basically we don't want to spend time building domains and UI before they were needed. So this is so that we take less time during extension start. And I think this is a bit more evident when you have a lot of schemes, like 50 schemes or something, saved locally, and then you need to load them when your extension starts. So this is where it will show some performance improvement. And basically, we don't initialize the data until the data is accessed. So for prop scheme, we introduce a quick load. So whenever you load a scheme, you can see that there's a quick load. By default is quick load equals to true. So the scheme values are stored in the object temporarily if you have quick load equals to true. And then when the data is accessed, then only we assign the loaders values to the scheme data to allow it to build the UI factory and domains. We also have a separate solution for catalog schemes because they are distributed in a different way and they are not really loaded in a different way as well, in the same way as well. So when you have a catalog scheme which can be distributed on the by the creator basically, and it's basically added to the container if the system detects that you have the catalog turned on and you have enabled its scheme, and then it gets added to a container. But in order to implement the same laziness, so what it does at that point is that it will append the lazy scheme, which is like a placeholder scheme, into the container. And then when it's actually accessed, then we swap out with the real scheme. So the real scheme is not created until we need to access it. So this is a core functionality, and you don't need to do any additional work to implement. I do see Rumpo raising his hand. So do you have a question? Let's see. If you have a question, either you can mute yourself or you can type it out. Otherwise,
that was a mistake. So just wrong click.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay. So you raised your hand by mistake. It's a typical mistake in a class. Yeah, my arm was just itchy. Just kidding, just kidding. Okay, all right. So lazy schemes. Okay, UI layouts. So this is where I promised to show you some of the things that we talked about. But why did we do this in the first place? One of the feedback we got with the layout before this was that if you have a lot of schemes, the original layout is a little uh, hard to scroll through all the schemes because it's a horizontal scroll at the top of the scheme. So we added a vertical layout like this. Coincidentally, if you use Microsoft Edge, you will see that they have added a similar feature. So maybe we're going the right direction. But basically, what we changed then is that all the schemes are listed here in a vertical manner. So this products tab was used to be here as well. Nothing changes. We kind of group them together. And then we moved the undo, redo, and revert options up here to make the whole UI a bit more consistent. And over here in the drop-down menu is where I talked about the group filter. So over here, by default, it's all, but then you could also see other filters like my schemes and drawing schemes in here. Yep. For this layout, it's possible to switch between the two layout options. You just go to triple dot here, and then there's a settings dialog, and then you can switch between the two. So you can use whichever you like. Presets. So what are presets? We added support for this, and it's basically a predefined schemes. And it's a little bit different from the default because there's only one default really. But then for presets, you can have a lot. And it's also different in a way that you can have thumbnails for them with the big image and the small image. And you cannot modify the values. So presets are fixed. If you click on modify preset here, it would actually create a copy of it rather than changing the actual preset value. So that's how it's different from the default scheme. Um, so this is how a preset looks like in a vertical layout. And in a horizontal layout, it looks like this. So all the presets are combined to the first tab. And then uh, I also wanted to talk about the little filter here. I mean, just now we talked about drawing and my schemes, but for presets, you can actually group them and you can define the filter yourself. So in this case, you see I have modern solid and the one below is modern wood. So for these two, I group them together as in the modern filter, show in the drop down. So how does it work? So it's a pretty fine with scheme with actual values. Uh, and you can define it by, if you're, of course, the extension owner. And a good example would be kitchen extensions because they have a lot of different styles and different presets, actually. So maybe they have Arctic white or modern wood, something like that. So this will allow the user to quickly change between several different suggested schemes. So very convenient if you know which color combinations that users might like, and then you put them into presets. You give it a nice preview, and then it's kind of like a way to market. So it's like, oh yeah, you can pair it like that. So of course you can also use this to recommend new material options and manufacturer preferred combinations. Well, so preset, how do you do this? You can define a preset through code in the extension, or you can publish a preset through the catalog creator. Yep. So on the catalog creator side, this is the preset builder. You would have a show and hide preset here. This is basically to cater for people who don't use presets, then they don't have to see this column here all the time. And when they toggle this column, then they get to see this. They can add a new preset group. And each group is basically an entry in the drop-down filter that I mentioned just now. And you can have a preview image to it. And the cool thing about the preview image is that you can either import the image as a JPEG, or you can import it from Photolab, or you can even render it from here in the Scheme tab. If I have time at the demo, I can show a little. So, yeah, so basically, we allow the users to build the presets, and you can create a group and upload the preset preview, can be rendered directly from Scheme card, or you can import them from Photolab. And yep, so if you create your presets from the catalog schemes, you need to upload the presets as well as the images separately. They will be added to your miscellaneous folder, but they will be kind of in the format of a CM scheme file. Yep. And I want to mention that if you are doing this in code instead, it's basically a scheme file that you ship with your extension. So typically in your REST folder, you would have some CM scheme files there, and then you have a method that you can override to point and look for these preset scheme URLs. Next up, we have group code domain. So this, as I mentioned, was a popular request. And the problem actually came from how when you set up a scheme layout, most of the time, well, before this, the only way to set up a property here, entry here, is by dragging it from the feature column. So when you drag it from the feature column, the layout knows that, okay, so this is a feature code entry, and I need to remember this feature code. But the problem is that feature code changes, and a lot of customers have the same problem. So if they make the layout as in 11.5, and then somewhere down the road, they've decided that, okay, we need to use a different feature code, but it's the same feature. So then how do we deal with that? We have a similar problem that we solve with group codes. So we thought we can solve this with the group code domain as well. So what is group code domain, and how is it different from the feature code domain? So a group code domain, so these are the group codes in the scheme part. And if you click on these group code domains, well, if you click on these group codes, you'll see that here you have a group code domain preview. And it's basically a domain with all the features with the same group code combined. So I know that this is a very common case for the commercial interior. So for example, you have storage material for high storage and storage material for low storage. But those are two different features, but you kind of want them to sit in the same property in your scheme, so that when you push, it will push to whatever that's applicable. So what happens then if you click on this is that it will take all the features with the same group code, and then we'll combine them here. And if you check through this preview and you think that, okay, this is what I want, then you can just click on this one and drag it in. just drag entry from the group code section, and then a group code entry will be made with a concatenated domain. Some disclaimer about the group code domain. So it will only work with if all your features are the same kind. If let's say some features are optional, some features are multiple select, and that wouldn't work. And then you will show a little warning here that says some of your features are different from the others. So for this to work, you have to be the same kind of features so that we can combine the domain correctly. Yep. Propagate too. So we added this enable propagate. Basically what it does is that it makes this little fast forward button show up. Is the fast forward button that pushes the value of this property to the other properties in the same scheme. So here. So for example, if I had other entries in the same scheme that also takes in this value also exists in the domain, you can push this button and then the value will get pushed over to all the other entries. So this is very handy when, let's say, oh, I want to change everything to white. I want this to be a white scheme, but then you don't want to go into each one of the properties one by one and edit them. Like, okay, base trim will be white and top trim will be white. Just change one to white and then push it. So the functionality has always been in prop scheme, but then now we have added it so that you can control it through your catalog scheme as well. Okay, and now we talk a little bit about the converter. So the converter is something that we have made to make it easier for you to generate a PS layout, because before this, the only way to generate a PS layout is through the catalog scheme, do with some drag and drop. But we have created a converter that supports creating a PS layout from a core scheme. So if you have a core scheme and you want to get a layout of it from it really fast, well, you can use this converter. And the intention behind is you can use this converter directly, or if you want to, if you need the behavior to be slightly different, you can also override it. So, and this can help speed up the process of migrating schemes over to catalog schemes a lot, because you don't have to sit there and do the dragging and dropping. Of course, if you have any custom properties, that one you still need to do it programmatically. So the generated PSAR object can be saved out to a file, or it can be used for reference when making a scheme. So the converter object and how to use it, we have added it in our migration guide. So over there, you can also see some example code of how to use it. So next, we're talking about layout scheme versus prop scheme. What's the difference? Why would you use one over the other? So the main difference between the layout scheme and the prop scheme is that layout scheme uses a layout, and this layout is the object that defines the tabs, the sections, and the entries. So for a regular prop scheme, to define all these things, you have to do it manually through the add child factories and init data. But if you have a layout defined, then the layout will automatically add the factories for you. And when I talk about layout, it's the same file that gets generated when you create a scheme layout in the scheme tab of the catalog creator. Yep. So the layout can be built and edited programmatically. So if you have additional custom entries, you can also append them after the layout has been loaded. And this is basically what the catalog scheme use with the layout object is being made by the catalog creator and saved to a file with the catalog. So basically, if you know that your extension uses catalog, I would highly recommend you to use the layout scheme because it's very easy to, you can split out the maintenance of the scheme layout to your catalog creator rather than you having to do it programmatically. And the release cycle is also then not tied to your extension release. It can be released whenever you're ready through the publish functionality of the catalog creator. So the layout prop scheme actually extends prop scheme. So you can work with the layout prop scheme in the exact same way as a prop scheme. So in one of the recent tickets that we did was we made sure that if you use a layout prop scheme, but you actually don't have a layout ready, you can still use it like a normal prop scheme. So this is what we did. So for those guys who are not sure that whether you will have a catalog or not in the future, you could always go with the layout prop scheme first. Even though your layout object is null, you could still use it like just like a prop scheme. So the advantage of using a regular prop scheme is that you have full control over everything. So it's not tied down by the layout. You basically can at every point say that you want this node to be here, you don't want that node to be there. You can do whatever you want. But if you use a layout prop scheme, you can still somewhat do that. But if you have a layout object defined, this layout object will actually help you with a lot of default behaviors. So all you need to do is to define the tabs, the sections, the entries, and then the applying, pushing the properties. We try to do a lot of that in core and in data symbol for you, especially for the schemes that's created on the catalog side. So we try to make sure that everything works well with the layout, and then the apply will work out of the box for you. So, I mean, in the common cases, you could really just, all you need to do is just to implement the layout, and then you get a working scheme out of the box. Yep. So, in this slide, I have included the link where the migration guide is written. So over here, I talk a little bit about, I revisited the behavior that we talked about last year. And there's also a lot of code examples, for example, versioning. So how does it look like? And scheme system key rename. How would you rename it? So all the actual code can be found here in this link. And let me just check how much time I have left. No, I do not have any time left. So, yep. So go check out the link. It basically covers everything that I talked about and more. Sorry that I didn't manage to get time for live demo, but do you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Poh Guan. There is one question. It says, Is the embedded scheme auto on by default? Most likely users wants to see the saved schemes every time loaded existed drawing.
I think we will do this different based on different industries. So I think the decision was that the embedded would be on by default for commercial interiors, but at the end of the day, I think you can also you have control over your own extension if you want it to be on or not. But for example, for walls extension, like we don't see a point of auto embedding your wall schemes. There's no need to bloat up the drawing size like that. Most people won't really be interested. So yeah, and I see Susel raised her hand.
Yeah, I want to check of the preset how that works. Can we work that? Because I have some requests for customer that want to have a recommended product combination. So like this table that you want to have recommended chair that go with it. Is that something that preset can work?
I am afraid not, because that would be an interaction between two different snappers, whereas preset is just like a suggestion for the properties within the same snapper. I mean, you can come up with suggestions if you have different, say, oh, let's say the black is the cheapest one, or is the lowest cost, or is the one that gets delivered fastest, and then you can have that. But if you say which table should go with which chair, I think that's a different problem.
I do have one question about I think the new class called PS Layout Prop Scheme.
Yeah.
What is different if I have a hybrid scheme which customize some, I would say, some properties in the snapper with catalog data properties in the scheme with PS layout prop scheme and PS layout scheme. Is there only difference thing is the props won't be streamed into the file, like the scheme, I think it's the layout file.
For the layout, we're only remembering what properties you want and what are the sections and what are the product, where are the product tabs. So we're not really remembering the actual value. If you want the actual value to be remembered, that's actually either, well, you have to remember it as a scheme file. But the main difference between the layout and the props, layout prop scheme and the prop scheme is that if you have a layout defined, then you don't need to do like, my scheme extend prop scheme and then override the append child factory and do like append this node with this property with this key, because all those things are defined in the creator already here. So over here, you're actually defining all the factories to be made. So this is a tab factory, there's a section factory, and this is a entry factory. So these are, you're kind of like predefining it for the prop scheme. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I guess I'm a bit confused about the layout prop scheme. Like if that is actually for hybrid, the scheme, like kind of customize some properties I want in the, not maybe not property, but just layout, like customize the layout with some of the snappers settings.
Yeah, I mean, a layout scheme is basically like a hybrid scheme. So you would,
Okay.
yep. And for everything that you see that we cannot control here, let's say you want to add a property that controls different class types to be pushed that is not in the data, you can do that programmatically as well. I have written a wiki page for that. It's called catalog-driven schemes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. That was since the last release though, so you guys have access to this already.
Okay.
But I am a little late. Mona, should we hand over to the next presenter? Or
Yes. Okay. So thank you, Poh Guan. Okay, so